warming of about 0.74 degrees in the average surface temperature of this planet during the 20th century. As a result of the melting of bodies of ice across the globe and thermal expansion of the oceans, sea level rise on an average has been 17 centimeters during the 20th century. This clearly is a subject that should concern us. I'm not saying this because I'm standing today in a state which is on the Indian Ocean, but because the impacts of climate change are going to be far more serious for the poor of this world, who have limited capacity and means to be able to adapt to these impacts. Last year, the IPCC brought out a special report on managing the risks of extreme events and disasters. This found, for instance, that since 1970, of the number of deaths that have taken place as a result of natural disasters, 95% were accounted for in developing countries. Even in economic terms, global weather and climate-related disaster losses reported since 1980 have ranged annually from a few US billion to above $200 billion in 2010 dollars. So this is on a basis that essentially discounts for inflation. With the highest value for 2005, the year of Hurricane Katrina. Loss estimates are, however, lower bound estimates because many impacts, such as loss of human lives, cultural heritage, and ecosystem services, are difficult to value and monetize, and thus they are poorly reflected in estimates of losses. Impacts on the informal or undocumented economy, as well as indirect economic effects, can be very important in some areas and sectors, but are generally not counted in reported estimates of losses. The impacts of climate change are important to consider in respect of their significance for several aspects of the human condition, including human health, agricultural yields, and availability of water. As qualified and highly educated graduates of this institution, you need to take the impacts of climate change into account, irrespective of the profession that you pursue. No matter where you are, the impacts of climate change would affect our lives to varying degrees. I can give you a personal anecdote. On Saturday, the 21st of July, I was to fly out of Beijing airport when a massive downpour grounded all the flights coming into or departing from Beijing. I'm informed that rainfall on that single day was the highest to have occurred in 61 years. Media reports indicate that perhaps during that day, almost 100 people lost their lives, and the estimate of economic losses was upward of $1.5 billion. Some months ago, when Bangkok suffered massive floods, the economic impacts were felt not only in Thailand, but across the globe, most notably in Japan, which sources from there a number of automobile components and other items used in production of automobiles and other products in Japan. I'm highlighting these facts only to emphasize that damage or degradation of the global commons is not just an environmentalist nightmare, but has implications for economic activities as well across the globe. The IPCC has clearly brought out in its findings the projection that increase in the frequency and magnitude of warm daily temperature extremes and decrease in cold extremes will occur in the 21st century at the global scale. It is very likely that the length, frequency, and or intensity of warm spells or heat waves will increase over most land areas, and a 1 in 20-year hottest day is likely to become a 1 in 2-year occurrence by the end of the 21st century. Just imagine this. Those heat waves that take place once in 20 years currently could, by the end of this century, become occurrences once in 2 years. And this would happen in most regions except in the high latitudes of the northern hemisphere, where it is likely to become a 1 in 5-year event. Also, it is likely that the frequency of heavy precipitation or the proportion of total rainfall from heavy falls will increase in the 21st century over most areas of the globe. A 1 in 20-year annual maximum daily precipitation amount is likely to become a 1 in 5 to 1 in 15-year event by the end of the 21st century in many regions. In most regions, if the world continues with high levels of emissions of greenhouse gases, the frequency of these events will be even shorter. So just think about it. In 2005, you will recall, the entire city of Mumbai had come to a complete halt. It was flooded. There were several lives that were lost, and perhaps 1 million people were affected in terms of the damage to their homes and property. Later this year, India will be hosting the 11th conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Protection of biological diversity has huge benefits for human beings. Most of the agriculture which human society benefits from is the produce of the rich biodiversity which exists on this planet. A large part of the cures for our health problems are essentially the contribution of diverse species and organic forms which are now synthesized in our manufacturing units. Equally important is the fact that if we destroy any part of our biodiversity, it could lead to diseases which may take quite some time for us to be able to find a cure for or appropriate response to. Loss of biodiversity and resultant outbreak of disease could affect human beings, animals, and agricultural crops. Human actions have already had a major impact on biodiversity, which in several cases will be difficult to reverse. The IPCC has estimated that a temperature increase beyond the range of 1.5 to 2.5 degrees Celsius could result in the threat of extinction of 20 to 30% of the species that were assessed. This is a possible outcome that obviously has to be prevented through all the means that we have at our command, and that we must create capacity for. And we have several means at our command which we need to use urgently. One such means through which we can mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases and stabilize the atmosphere and climate of this planet would be through efficient use of energy in all our activities and large-scale use of renewable sources. In a special report prepared by the IPCC, it has been found that the costs of most renewable energy technologies have declined, and additional expected technical advances would result in further cost reductions. It's important to observe that of the approximate 300 gigawatts of new electricity generating capacity added globally over the 2-year period from 2008 to 2009, 140 gigawatts came from renewable energy additions. Collectively, developing countries host 53% of global renewable energy electricity generation capacity. This, of course, includes hydropower, but various modern biomass options, photovoltaic, and wind have made significant advances. My purpose in highlighting some of these facts and future projections is only to urge the students of this institution of excellence to dedicate themselves to their tasks, not only as successful engineers, technologists, and managers in the organizations where they would work, but also as dedicated citizens of planet Earth. We have a short window of opportunity in which we can move towards a pattern of sustainable development, which is inclusive, equitable, and sensitive to the principles of providing fair opportunities to this generation as well as generations yet to come. Our responsibility to all living beings is part of our cultural heritage and rich traditions. In my view, India has to evolve as a model of sustainable development which the rest of the world can emulate and benefit from. This model can be designed and created only by the leaders that an institution like this produces and equips for meeting the challenges that lie ahead. May I wish you all the best in your mission, and as you graduate from this institution, I hope you would also remember to graduate as successful citizens of planet Earth. Thank you.